Hi, I'm Marcia Green, and I have a confession to make. I love reality TV. If you've ever watched any reality TV, some of the things that you're going to learn today about Thomas Gordon's discipline by self-control method of managing the classroom might sound familiar to you. Things like Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew, where they have group therapy. They're always using I messages, just like Thomas Gordon. And I found that very funny. So Thomas Gordon was born in 1918 and recently passed away in 2002. And he is a licensed clinical psychologist. Dr. Gordon received his BA from DePaul University, his MA from Ohio State University, and his PhD from the University of Chicago, where he served on the faculty for 5 years. And from 1942 to 1946, he served in the Army Air Force. Dr. Gordon has been the author of 9 books. And all of these books are centered around his theory that the best way to manage people, whether you're a parent in parent effectiveness training, or a leader in leader effectiveness training, or a teacher in teacher effectiveness training, that you need to develop a relationship with people and to manage them through self-control instead of using the rewards and punishment style of managing people. He's also developed a lot of self-help groups and talks and conferences that people went to, and this group still is working today. He has a website. You can sign up for conferences to learn about parent effectiveness training and teacher effectiveness training and leader effectiveness training even today. So the teacher effectiveness training book, it's communication between the student and the teacher. You should be your most authentic self and not be a perfect teacher. In the classroom, it's important to recognize that if you're putting on a fake persona, that the teachers are going to perceive that and they're not going to be able to connect with you. So instead of trying to be the perfect teacher, you might want to try to be approachable. It's important to also recognize, according to Dr. Gordon, that teachers, that they're teaching and students are learning, and those are very different things. And Dr. Gordon says that when you do have a problem with a student's behavior in class, that there's 2 methods, 2 different categories that you want to put those problems into: the student-owned problem and the teacher-owned problem. So some examples of a student-owned problem is if a student is daydreaming in class, if they're not doing their homework, or if they're not paying attention. And some examples of a teacher-owned problem is the student comes to class late and interrupts you, so you're not able to teach. You have to take care of that. Or the student is talking during your lesson, which is interfering with your ability to teach the class. Or students are fighting or bullying another member of the class, so they're interfering with another student's ability to learn. Those 2 different styles, 2 different categories of problems need to be addressed in 2 different ways. And so the first way we're going to talk about is a student-owned problem. And Dr. Gordon says that there's 12 roadblocks to communication. And communication is the cornerstone of being an effective teacher. And so these 12 roadblocks are things that you don't want to do. So if the student, say, is daydreaming in class, these are the 12 things that you don't want to do. You don't want to order them to stop daydreaming or command them. You don't want to give them a warning, like if you don't pay attention, you're going to fail. You don't want to moralize and start preaching like you should be paying attention in class or you ought to be paying attention in class. You don't want to advising or offering solutions. Like in number 5, teaching, lecturing, or giving logical arguments. Number 6, judging, criticizing, disagreeing, or blaming. Number 7, name-calling, stereotyping, or labeling. Number 8, interpreting, analyzing, or diagnosing. Number 9, praising, agreeing, or giving positive evaluation. Number 10, reassuring, sympathizing, consoling, or supporting. Number 11, questioning, probing, interrogating, or cross-examining. Number 12, withdrawing, distracting, being sarcastic, or using humor to divert. So all of these things are the things that we would naturally do if someone was daydreaming in class. We would make a comment. We might make a sarcastic comment. We might try to give them a lecture about why it's important to pay attention in class. And if we don't do these things, we almost feel like we're condoning their bad behavior. And so sometimes people who hear this method, they have a reaction like, this doesn't sound right. But he says that the student knows that what they're doing is wrong. They know that it's interfering with their learning, but they've made that choice to daydream. So something's going on with them that has caused them to make that choice. And what you can do is to try to connect with that student so that you can find out why they've made that choice and help them to realize for themselves that that isn't the best choice for them. So when you're dealing with a student-owned problem, one of the keys that you can do as a teacher is called passive listening. You can broach the subject, ask them to stay after class and say, I noticed you've been daydreaming, and then listen to what they have to say. The less you say, the better. You can use acknowledge responses like, oh, I see. And instead of using the 12 roadblocks type things. You can use door openers to get the conversation going. Like, it sounds like you have some strong feelings about that. Or, I'm interested in what you're saying. You can use active listening. That's when you're going to mirror back what they're saying. You can reiterate what they said. It seems like you feel frustrated. And this can help you to develop trust in the student to solve their problems and show the students that you respect their privacy and restate what they have said to show your hearing and understanding. So again, the student-owned problems, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to find a way to help your student, to guide your student to understand for themselves and make the decision to start paying attention in class, for them to see that that has value. And Dr. Gordon's method suggests that the best way to do that is through listening. Now, on the other hand, if there's a teacher-owned problem, such that the student is doing something that interferes with your ability to teach the class, or the student does something that interferes with other students' ability to learn, that's when you're going to be using I messages. And that's what reminds me of the reality TV shows. Have you ever seen group therapy where people try to communicate their frustrations with each other with an I message? That means that you shouldn't say you should say, I feel frustrated when this happens. I feel frustrated when my class is interrupted and I have to stop what I'm doing and it makes it hard for me to teach the lesson. I feel frustrated when people are talking when I'm trying to teach because it's interfering with my ability to teach the class and everyone else's ability to learn. Instead of saying, you need to stop talking, you're interrupting the class. So here's some examples. When I find papers left on the floor, when I see new books with torn pages, when I can't find materials I left on the table, when I get interrupted while I give instructions. So you try to do this, and then the natural reaction of the student is they are going to feel like they need to defend themselves. So you need to recognize that after you've done an I message, they're going to come back at you and give you an excuse. And Dr. Gordon says in the book, Teacher Effectiveness Training, that at this point, you shouldn't start an argument and go back and forth. You said what you needed to say, and now it's time for you to switch gears and to start doing your active listening. Listen to what they said and let them come to the realization that they need to change their behavior. And the best way to do that is if they feel accepted. Like you heard their perspective, you heard their point of view, and now you're going to move on. Now, if the iMessages aren't working, you've tried it and that student continues to talk in class, they continue to come in late, or whatever it is happening, it's continuing. Your iMessages haven't worked. Another technique that you can use is to modify the classroom environment. Maybe there's something you need to change about the way that you teach the class or way the class is arranged, so that whatever it is the student is doing isn't going to interrupt your teaching or other people's learning. You know, if someone has to come in late every day because of a job or whatever reason, maybe instead of stopping your instruction and redoing the role and stuff like that, maybe you can come up with another solution so that they can quietly slide in and it doesn't affect you. And then the last method is called the no-lose method. So Dr. Gordon explains this, that you and the student put your heads together and you have a one-on-one discussion where you use iMessages and you show them that you're on their side, but you want to come up with a solution where nobody loses. You don't want to make them completely change everything that they're doing so that you win and get your way, but you don't want to lose. So you need to find out what you as a teacher really need to teach your class and what they really need in order to fulfill their needs as a person. It involves two-way communication and mutual respect. So critiques of Gordon's theories. Now, according to Manning in the classroom management models, application and causes, some of the criticisms of Gordon's theory is that iMessages are a valuable tool used by psychologists and in anger management, and they've been used for over 50 years. You know, Dr. Gordon's book, Teacher Effectiveness Training, was actually written in 1974. So it feels like these theories are new agey, but they're really quite established and have been around for a long time. In reading his book, I couldn't help but notice how many of the things that he talked about in classrooms are still relevant today. And his book was written before No Child Left Behind and before Common Core. But a lot of the ways that we feel today are the same ways that people felt 50 years ago. Focus on incorporating the interests of the students into instruction is an effective tool for motivating and capturing a student's interests. However, and here's where we have the criticism, while this method of classroom management is effective for creating a classroom atmosphere where there are fewer discipline problems, when a discipline problem does arise, this method is not a very effective tool to stop a fight or a student tantrum. So many people feel that this method of classroom management will make it so that you have fewer interruptions and fewer problems with behavior. It's a what to do to make sure that you don't have problems. But when you do have a problem, it's probably not going to be effective to use I statements, or you might have to do more. Discipline by self-control is better for long-term self-control. Behaviorism rewards and punishment more immediate results than that do not last. So I was reading Classroom Discipline That Promotes Self-Control in a Journal of Applied Development Psychology, and it compared different styles of discipline and it cited many different studies that have been done over the course of the last 50 years to compare these two different styles of teaching. Do you want to use detentions and consequences, or do you want to use try to get students to control themselves by motivating them to have self-control? And so there's a lot of people feel different ways and feel very strongly, and you'll see in most classrooms that behaviorism is the prevalent way that people use classroom management, but there is a lot of evidence to suggest that if you use discipline by self-control, you have a better chance of having less discipline problems in your classroom overall. The teacher's role is to create a classroom environment and a relationship with the student that promotes a feeling of acceptance for each student. Teachers need to encourage students to take responsibility for their behavior and for their learning. The teacher presents materials in an engaging manner aligned with what the teacher knows about the student's interests, and the teacher needs to trust the students. The student is responsible for their own learning, and the student is responsible for their behavior. The student has to believe in their own ability to solve problems. So how would I apply this to my classroom? I would get to know my students' interests and utilize this information in my communication with the students and in lessons. I would distinguish between student-owned problems and teacher-owned problems and differentiate my response depending on the type of problem. I will create an environment where students feel accepted. And I would avoid the 12 roadblocks to communication and employ active listening. I will be my most authentic self and try not to be the perfect teacher. Now I know that my background, I worked at a library and I was in charge of youth services, and we did a program every Wednesday where we had about 20 teenagers come, and we did paint classes, we put on plays, we did chess club, and I noticed upon reflection that a lot of the tools given in Dr. Gordon's method are things that I use whenever I'm in charge of students and even with my kids at home. I never really have used I statements, and I do tend to be preachy, but I can see how it is important that students need to make the choice to have good behavior. They have to make the choice to learn, and they're more likely to make that choice if it comes from within rather than it's for a reward or it's in fear of a punishment. And here's my works cited page in case you're interested. And thank you very much. And I hope that this information has been valuable to you and that you'll be able to utilize it in your classroom.